I mean, I don't know what to say. You're under arrest. I mean, making a mass arrest. It was a violent protest. People were spray painting, breaking windows, burning trash cans, destroying property. And the SOD commander believes this group was responsible for it. And you're all getting arrested.
All right, thank you. On January 20th, earlier this year, during the inauguration of Donald Trump, a large protest stormed through the streets of Washington, D.C. with many people in black bloc, meaning they're wearing hoods, black masks, they're wearing all black, and many of those people were smashing windows, committing vandalism and property destruction, flipping dumpsters and barricades. Initially, the police made some arrests, pepper spray was deployed, the crowd was running through the streets, and eventually, the police surrounded a large group, over 230 of these individuals, and mass arrested them. I was included in this mass arrest, but along with several other journalists, was ultimately released without charge. The prosecutors have charged many of these people, I think most of them, with conspiracy, with a felony. And the first trial in this case is underway. According to the Huffington Post, 6 defendants, Jennifer Armento, Alexi Wood, Oliver Harris, Michelle Machio, Brittany Lawson, and Christina Simmons, were among the 234 people arrested en masse during the protest on January 20th, commonly referred to as the J20 protests. This is the first group to go on trial. There's still over 200 more people, but this trial could set precedent, and it could determine whether or not the prosecution will continue pursuing charges against the other remaining 200 plus individuals. Now, the prosecution paints this as a group of people that knew crimes were being committed and decided to stay. In a dramatic opening statement, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Kirchhoff repeatedly referred to a sea of black masks that roamed the city, causing chaos, violence, and destruction. Authorities have said there was more than $100,000 in property damage that day. The prosecution's first witness was the manager of a downtown Auburn-Payne cafe that had its windows broken. The prosecution told stories of a limousine driver who had their vehicle set on fire, a Starbucks employee who had to dive to dodge, breaking glass, and police officers who felt helpless to stop this. Kirchhoff told the jurors that 6 defendants made a choice to take part in a violent and destructive riot, arguing they had countless opportunities to walk away, to say this was too much, this isn't what I signed up for, this isn't what I'm going to do, this isn't how I'm going to express my opinion. Instead, she said, the defendants chose to stay and helped this path of destruction through the city, moving together with the group as individual members popped out, caused destruction, and were reabsorbed into the massive group. So first, I want to say, what's the point of a black bloc? You'll see these people all wearing black hoodies, black pants, and masks. Well, there's 2 reasons. A smaller reason that is often quoted by these individuals is to show solidarity. They want people to see this large mass and realize that these people are all in agreement with each other for the most part, that it's one unified body that has planned this. But the other reason is so that it becomes increasingly difficult or impossible for police and prosecutors to single out individuals who commit acts of vandalism and other crimes. In this instance, the prosecution is alleging that these people were jumping out of the crowd, destroying property, and then being reabsorbed. That essentially, the people that weren't committing violence but were still in black bloc were trying to shield those that were committing a crime, in which case they're being charged with conspiracy. Each of them made a choice, and each of them played a role, Kirchhoff said. You don't personally have to be the one who breaks the window to be guilty of rioting. Now, before I move on, I just want to say, in my opinion, I feel that the felony charges are a bit excessive. These are people who are looking at several decades in prison, and many of them were just ignorant bystanders who didn't understand what was going on, were told, hey, come join this protest, and they do. We know that in many instances, more extreme protesters on the far left recruit people who don't know they intend to commit acts of violence, and they use them as shields, essentially. We've seen this behavior in the past, and it's being alleged now in the case of January 20th. But my biggest issue with the reporting is how many of these news organizations complain about the arrests of journalists that were caught in the kettle. The police surrounded 234 plus people, around that number. And in that group were journalists and legal observers. Legal observers are lawyers who come down to protests to witness so they can provide testimony or make a statement. Some of these people that were arrested who were journalists were released, myself included. What happened was, after they surrounded us, I was pushed to the back. I made my way to the far right to get out of the group, and standing next to me were several other reporters and journalists with large organizations, and I calmly informed the officers and the supervisor that I was press and that I had a press card. And the police officer told me it didn't matter, that we were being arrested anyway, so I asked the officer to make a statement for the camera, to which he did, and this is what happened.
I mean, I don't know what to say. You're under arrest. I mean, making a mass arrest. It was a violent protest. People were spray painting, breaking windows, burning trash cans, destroying property. And the SOD commander believes this group was responsible for it. All
right, thank you. Now, as you can see, my demeanor was very, very calm. Here I am in this kettle, being told that I was under arrest because of the violence in the protest. That officer, that was Lieutenant Washington, ultimately pulled me and I believe 4 or 5 others out. It's been almost a year now. Checked our press credentials and let us go. But several journalists were still arrested. And often in this reporting, they omit the fact the police released several journalists without charge, including myself. Now, I feel personally that the reason they're doing this is because they want to make it seem like the police arresting journalists is a violation of First Amendment rights and things like that. To an extent, yes, it is. And that can be seen in the fact that some of these journalists were charged, but ultimately had their charges dropped. The police know that some of these people are reporters. One of these people that has been charged, and is currently on trial, Alexi Wood, is a long-standing journalist for over 3 years working out of Texas. The prosecution is arguing that in his live stream of the events, you can hear him cheering on, saying woo, and yelling when destruction happens. They're arguing that he is essentially cheering on the crowd, while his defense is arguing he is cheering to his audience. And I have to say, look, I've done live streams, I've exclaimed emotion before. In no way does it mean I'm taking part in any of these actions. And I'm a bit shocked to find that the prosecution will pursue a case against someone who has proof they were simply documenting the event, regardless of what their emotional state was at the time. But I can confirm that these legal observers, at least one of them, was screaming at the top of his lungs at the police. That at least one of these journalists was trying to get other journalists arrested by yelling to the police, trying to stop them from pulling us out, which I take personal offense to. I understand why some of these journalists and legal observers were arrested because I witnessed them screaming, I filmed them screaming. And the demeanor of those that were released was calm and just simply stated the facts. Look, we're journalists, let us know what you need us to do. Ultimately, we were released, and those that were being a bit more aggressive were not released. Now, I don't know if all of the journalists and all of the legal observers were yelling at the police and being aggressive. It may have just been that they were too far in the crowd and the police couldn't make the distinction. In which case, those of us that separated ourselves from the crowd were clearly visible as journalists, and we weren't wearing clothes in any way that made us look like protesters. In my opinion, the charges against journalists should have been dropped immediately, and the charges against legal observers should have been dropped as well. Keep in mind that some of these legal observers are actually progressive activists, but they're clearly distinguishable from those that were committing acts of violence. Now, as for the conspiracy charge, I think it's a bit of a stretch, and many people have argued that it's unconstitutional, that it can't stand. But according to the prosecution, you had a group of people that acted together to commit a crime. And then in furtherance of that action, many people were able to commit other crimes in an attempt to hide their identities and not get caught, in which case the police have decided just to charge everyone. It's a tough situation. How do you protect those that are simply trying to sell coffee at Starbucks? How do you protect those that are simply trying to work at a bank and they don't understand the politics of what's happening? So I decided to see, is it actually illegal to wear a mask in Washington, D.C. in an event like this? Was there an actual conspiracy? 22-3312.03, wearing hoods or masks, District of Columbia Code. No person or persons over 16 years of age while wearing any mask, hood, or device whereby any portion of the face is hidden, concealed, or covered as to conceal the identity of the wearer shall. There are many things listed under this, but we'll jump straight to the one that matters. 3. Hold any manner of meeting or demonstration. They also say that you can't wear a mask if you're going to intimidate or threaten or deprive somebody, and the prosecution can certainly argue that, but I think the facts are clear. A large group of people planned to show up in DC for a demonstration and informed everyone to wear masks, to which many of them did. In which case, those that were wearing masks conspired with a large group of people to commit a crime. Now I have to add, this is a remarkably minor offense, and these people are being charged with felonies and facing decades in prison, which again, I feel is extremely excessive considering a lot of these people are young and don't understand exactly what's going on or exactly why they're doing what they're doing. They feel very strongly about Donald Trump and politics, as is their right. They have a right to protest. They have a First Amendment right to go out in the streets and make their voices heard. Unfortunately, this kind of behavior is overshadowed by violent destruction targeting other civilians. During Occupy Wall Street, a lot of people told me that they believed smashing bank windows and Starbucks windows was important. And I asked them why. They said they wanted to cause damage to the system. They wanted to bring it down. Things like that. It's not verbatim, but that tends to be one of the responses. Some people say that they want to cause as much damage and cost as much money as possible to corporations like Starbucks and things like that. And so I asked them, what do you think happens when you smash that window? How do you think the people inside that establishment feel, the working class individuals? Let's say there's a Starbucks employee making $12 an hour, trying to pay their way through college or feed their family or pay their bills. Just simple living. You smashing their window gets the store closed down for a few days, and now they're unable to go to work. They lose wages. Do you think they're going to agree with you and support you in your revolution or whatever, your protest, whatever you want to call it? Probably not. How do you think the bank employee feels who's making, $35,000 per year as a low-level employee wearing their suit every day, and they show up and there's glass everywhere? And then the bank has to be shut down because they've got to clean up the glass, the safety hazard. Do you think that they're going to support your protest? Do you think the customers of that bank are going to say, I like what they did damaging the bank that I have to use to cash my checks? The answer is not really. It's an incredibly ineffective way to bring about change. I said to someone at Occupy Wall Street, I'll tell you what, you put on a nice shirt and some pants, you stand in front of that bank, and you politely smile and shake the hands of those individuals walking by and explain to them why they should move their money to a credit union, or why they should support a mom and pop coffee shop, a small business instead of Starbucks, and you are more likely to cause damage to those businesses, and you are making everyone feel good in the process. The people working at Starbucks will probably chuckle and say, yeah, I get it. The people outside will say that was very nice of you, and the Starbucks Corporation will say, God damn it. But you won't cause anyone harm, you won't cause any destruction, you won't make people feel bad, you won't make life worse for those that are using this institution. Another friend of mine told me, the reason that people do this is because Starbucks is a symbol. Bank of America, it's a symbol. They're symbols of what they feel are causing them strife, and they get an emotional response by causing damage to that symbol. It has nothing to do with whether or not they will further their goals. It has nothing to do with whether or not they'll ever succeed, or whether or not Bank of America is actually the bank that they're angry at. It's just a symbol, the big banks, the big corporations, and they want to take a smack against the man who's held them down. The trial has just begun and the reporting has just kicked up on this. It's really, really interesting. We're going to hear some interesting arguments, interesting precedent, because conspiracy charges against a black bloc protest. There was vandalism, there was destruction, there was tear gas, there were arrests, and there were mass arrests. It's going to be really fascinating. And the last thing I want to say to any journalist who might be watching this, there's more to the story than the police just arrested a bunch of journalists, because they also released several journalists without charge. The story is more nuanced than just a blanket mass arrest that was unconstitutional. Argue what you will, I simply want to point out my point of view and my experience at this protest and how I got released by being calm and rational and speaking politely to the police officers who pulled out me and many other journalists. So keep that in mind if you hear more about this story as well. Comment below and let me know what you think. We'll keep the conversation going. If you want to support my work, you can go to timcast.com/donate. Give whatever you'd like or give nothing at all. My videos are always free and available every day at 4 p.m. If you want to follow me for breaking news and live streams around the world, I'm on Twitter at timcast, and you can subscribe to this channel. Also, hit that like button. If you've made it this far, do me the favor because it really helps out. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.